Okay, good afternoon. Hi everyone. Welcome to Meet Your Future National Careers Week. I'm Bronwyn. I'm part of the Bridge GM team here at Greater Manchester Combined Authority. In 2019, we launched Meet Your Future so that young people just like you can have meaningful conversations with employers and experience the workplace. And over the past 12 months or so, we've really been speaking to young people right across Greater Manchester, so from our 10 different boroughs of GM, to find out how you are feeling and how you think that you should be supported now and also into the future. And we've really been listening to what you've been saying, and we've been learning a lot, and we've developed a suite of resources and services that are there to help you, which can be found on our Greater Manchester Apprenticeship and Career Service, GMAX. I know many of you will already be familiar with GMAX, and I'll pop the link into the chat as well, but if you're not, please do speak to your teachers about how this can support you. We have also been using your feedback to adapt our Meet Your Future campaign to fit better into what you've been telling us. Through this year, you can join sessions with a range of Greater Manchester and national employers about growth sectors across Greater Manchester, pathways, and the vast array of different opportunities here that we've got in Greater Manchester. And today you will be hearing from Mike, who is a commercial manager at EQUANS. Hopefully the session today will really inform and inspire you and show how you should be optimistic about your future here in Greater Manchester. And we want to make this session as interactive as possible too. So throughout the presentation today and when Mike's talking, please do put all of your kind of questions into the comment box, and we'll have a good time at the end of the session to ask Mike some different questions as well. But without further ado, I will now pass over to Mike, who will introduce himself and the session today.
Okay. Thanks, Bronwyn. Hopefully we can all see that presentation. So I'm here today to talk to you about quantity surveying. Hello, my name is Michael Cullen, and I'm currently commercial manager at EQUANS, who, amongst other things, undertakes social housing, refurb and regeneration construction projects. I've worked in the industry for 24 years as a quantity surveyor at various levels. Okay, so if we start off with an overview of the construction industry itself, it's a big part of the UK economy. These figures are probably a year or two out of date, but the industry has a turnover of 112 billion in the UK alone. So it's a really large part of the UK. There are over 300,000 construction firms in the UK. Now, the vast majority of these will be sole traders or partnerships, rather than the part of the industry that we're looking at today, which is the major main contractors. Balfour Beatty are the leading company in the UK, based on profit, and they alone turn over 8.4 billion. And I think we'll get into this more in the presentation, but it's important to realise that there's a lot more to the industry than just the bricklayers and the joiners that you may traditionally think of as the construction industry. So staying on this sector, as you can see, there are 2.7 million people employed in the industry in the UK. Now, these are employed across a whole range of positions. There are many different types of job in the sector. So you've got your obvious joiners, bricklayers, electricians, etc., to architects, engineers, site managers, quantity surveyors, looking at today, and then huge numbers of support staff, so admin, accountants, payroll, buying, IT, health and safety, huge number of different types of roles you can play outside of just the trades. And again, looking at those figures, Balfour's employ the most people according to these figures. And just a note there at the bottom, there are 60,000 QSs operating in the UK. So there is a lot of us, even if some of you may not know much about it at the start of this presentation. Hopefully that will change by the end. Okay, now notwithstanding some of the big numbers we've spoken about on the previous slide, for as long as I've worked in the industry, we seem to have had a skills shortage. That is a shortage of people coming into the industry. So purely from a pragmatic point of view, if you do choose to enter the industry, you'll probably always be in work, which is always worth thinking about. Okay, so moving on, we come to the overview of the QS role. So it's a good definition that I found here. A construction industry professional with expert knowledge on construction costs and contracts. Now, we're often described as the accountants of construction. I'm not sure about that myself. I think there's a lot more interaction with people needed. It's not just a case of going away and working the numbers. And as well as the numbers side of it, and I know this is a maths-based session, you do need to develop good knowledge of construction contracts as well and how to apply them. It's quite a varied role, but a big part of it is obviously the numbers and the figures. So looking at the history, evolution of the role was originally developed to prepare the bills of quantities. So that's basically, it's a document describing the material, items of work, the quantities or the amount needed. There is a need for one standard way of measuring this and pricing construction work. So clients know that when you're comparing prices from, say, 4 or 5 different main contractors, they know that all the contractors have priced it in the same way using this bill of quants, and that allows you to compare different prices a lot easier. So that was how it was first developed. First recorded use of the term quantity surveyor was in 1859, so we have been around for a long time. Originally, the QSs were working advising the client against a nasty builder. A lot of clients won't have experience of construction matters, so their QS can offer impartial guidance and advice. But obviously, as things progress, if the client has a QS, then the contractor wants one too. So that role developed. Despite the name, production of bills of quantities is less and less a part of the role. We do still get taught it at college, but these days, if you want bills of quants producing, there's specialist bill houses that carry out that role. So different types of QSs. There's the client's QS, sometimes known as the PQS. So they work on the client side. So initially they'd advise the client on high level costs, but if the client will come to them with an outline of a scheme, the QS will be able to give them a rough idea of what the costs are likely to be, and then the client can see whether it's within their budget or not. All being well, that would then develop into obtaining tenders from main contractors, analysing, negotiating and agreeing a price. So they would go out to 3 or 4 main contractors and say, can you price this scheme? Once them prices come in, then the PQS will be responsible for making sure all is well with the price, it all makes sense, everyone's priced the same thing. They'd go back into with the main contractor, they'd develop, make sure everything is well, negotiate, and then finally, hopefully, agree on a price. Then they'd be responsible for putting the main contract in place. Once works are on site, they'll be managing it commercially, so valuing applications from the contractor's QS, issuing any instructions, and ultimately, at the end of the job, agreeing the final account. So quite varied, the PQS. You've gone from advising the client at a very high level to actually getting involved with the the monthly works on site. Contractors QS then, so that has a similar role, but they're doing it for the contractor. So they probably have some involvement in pricing the tender, but then they'd be heavily involved in negotiating the main contract with the PQS. Once that's in place, they then procure the subcontractors. So this is the people who will actually build the works on behalf of the main contractor. Generally, most main contractors these days don't have bricklayers, electricians, joiners working for them. So every element of work, you'd go out to a specialist subcontractor. So that part of the role is key for any main contractor's QS. So the idea being, you price the works at £10 million, say, but then you get the subcontractors to undertake that work for less than that £10 million figure. That's how it should work. And similar to the PQS, they'd manage the works on site from the angle of the main contractor. So we'd submit and agree applications to the client's QS for getting paid money to us. And also applications will come in from the subcontractors. So you'd need to agree the valuations with them on a monthly basis as well. And at the end of the job, agree the final accounts with everybody. And then finally, the subcontractor's QS. So again, similar to the main contractor, if they have a QS, subcontractors won't know as well. Their role is very similar to the contractor's QS, only they're doing it from their side, obviously. One main difference is most quantity surveyors would get more involved in placing material orders, paying wages, that sort of thing. It's probably more hands-on from that point of view than a main contractor or a PQS. So again, that might be of interest to some people. And obviously, they'd have to manage the works on site from their angle. So submit valuations to the main contractor's QS and agree the same and agree the final accounts, as well as managing their subcontract and supplier accounts from their end. Key role for all QSs is to undertake the CVR, critical part of the role. CVR stands for Cost and Value Report and is basically forecasting what we think the end position will be. So cost is obviously what we spend, value is what we get paid. The idea being your value is higher than your cost. So every month a new CVR is carried out. So you input that month's costs and then you're forecasting any changes to the end position. Another key part of the role is managing any contract disputes with any of the other parties. So in theory, we could have the main contractor could have a dispute with the client, which the PQS would manage. There may be disputes with the subcontractors. Anything legal, the first port of call is the QS on a construction project. If things get beyond a certain point, you can involve lawyers, but generally the QS is the first port of call. So in terms of the day-to-day QS, typical day, if you like, it is a very varied role. Every day will be different within the monthly commercial cycle. So you could be on site, or you could be in a meeting with the clients in their office. You could be agreeing final accounts with subbies, or you could be in your main office preparing contract documents. You could be locked away producing your CVR, uploading the monthly figures. I can't stress enough that it is a very varied role. Basically, if you're the sort of person who wants to sit in the same office 40 years at the same desk, it isn't going to be like that. It's probably a lot more varied than you think. Okay, so in terms of links to education and curriculum, You will need a degree these days. Wasn't the case a few years ago. My first boss was a former joiner, but these days you do need a degree. However, there is more than one pathway to that degree. So you could apply for a full-time degree and you could go down the A-level route. So there's a list of subjects there that could be useful. Maths is an obvious one. I think that obviously we're on a maths session. Business studies, economics, physics, law. Law again would be very useful because you do get involved in the construction contract. I would stress that the sort of law we're talking is construction contracts generally are written in quite an easy to read language, so you don't need to know the ins and outs of law. It's just, again, it's just handy if you have an interest in it. Geography, design technology, ICT, which I think is probably useful for every job you do these days. Obviously we're using technology at the minute, and my day is spent in front of a computer, really, if I'm not on site. So all those subjects will be useful, but, and I just need to stress this, no quantity surveying degree course requests any specific A-level subject. So please don't anyone worry if you started doing A-levels that you don't think have those subjects in them. No subjects are essential to do the quantity surveying course. Just useful to have certain ones rather than others. So sticking to the full-time degree route here, you don't have to have A-levels. You can always apply having obtained A-level equivalents, MVQs or similar. I think if you were applying for an MVQ in construction or similar would be helpful, but again, the degree courses wouldn't insist on that. Another route you could do is you start off by doing a HND or a HNC in quantity surveying or a similar discipline, and then that would allow you to transfer to the QS degree, I think in year 2 as far as the full-time degree is concerned. HNDs, I think, is a 2-year course. HNC part-time is probably either 2 or 3 years, so it does extend the whole process by at least a year. But if you think your qualifications, for example, weren't of a high enough level to go straight onto a full-time degree, another route to do it is to start on a HND or HNC and then transfer that way. It's quite a common route. So it'll be a 3-year full-time course. If you do a year out, it'll be 4 years. So the year out is basically a sandwich year, as they call it, and that's where you work in industry for a year. It's normally in between years 2 and 3, or what would be tier 2 and 4. You get paid, and universities help you with placements, etc. And at the end of the degree course, you finish up with a Bachelor of Science in Quantity Surveying. And if you do a dissertation, it would be an honours degree. Very wide-ranging course. You learn all about the industry, how it's built, how it all works, as well as the more QC subjects, so construction law, economics, etc. And of course, maths. So construction technology, that's obviously how buildings are built, basically. Maths is an obvious one. Law, again, I just stress, this is not the equivalent of doing a law degree. It is quite low-level law. Structural mechanics, again, most of you on this call like maths, but don't let that put you off. You just, I wouldn't say dabbling, but you're just getting a flavour for structural mechanics and how design of buildings works. Measurement, so that's the stuff we talked about earlier, where it's a specific way that everyone's supposed to measure things, so everyone knows they've done it in the same way. QS procedures, that's just how the QS function works, and economics. Okay, so that was the full-time degree route. The alternative would be a part-time degree. So this is where you get a job with a PQS or main contractor and you work for them full-time, but 1 day a week is spent at college. Your employer will pay your fees, excuse me, your employer will pay your fees, which obviously is not an insignificant amount these days, but the chances are you would be tied down to a plan. So you won't be able to get your degree, thanks very much, and then move on. You generally have to work for that employer for a couple of years after your degree. It's quite a common route. That was how I did it actually 20 odd years ago. So you basically work 4 days and attend university 1 day a week during the academic term. So the part-time degree course is a 5-year course, which does sound a long time, but it flies by once you start it. 1 day a week spent at university, as we said. You come away with exactly the same degree as if you undertook it full time. Some universities offer working through the summer to shave some time off the 5 years. There's a couple of the trainees at my place have done. I think they finished in 4 years just by attending college in the summer. So, quicker way of doing it. Very common route in the construction industry, part-time, very common. Exactly the same course content as on the full-time degree course. I won't go through that list again. I'll just reinforce part-time degrees are common. There's certainly no two-tier system of degrees in the industries. There's no snobbery about whether someone's done a full-time degree or a part-time degree. It is a good way to get into the industry. I suppose the key benefit is you are getting paid for those 5 years, whereas if you do a full-time degree, obviously you're not. Okay, so career route. So you could be employed by a PQS practice. So you'd be a consultant, basically employed by various clients to offer advice and guidance. So the clients would employ the consultant on a project by project basis. If they had a project they wanted you to look at, they would employ you purely for that project. You'd be office based for the most part, and you would need to become a member of the Chartered Institute of Surveyors, the RICS. Or you could be employed directly and permanently by a main contractor. So you'd be working on projects that the main contractor has won. You're likely to be site-based, initially at least. As you get more senior, you may transition to a more office-based role. No need to be chartered with this route. Excuse me. And in comparison with the PQS, who should be giving entirely impartial advice, a contractor's QS is employed to protect the contractor's position. So it will take a more commercial view on things. So you're there really to just defend your employer. So there's less emphasis on being impartial and more trying to look for routes to better position the main contractor. Finally, the final route is the subcontractor. So you could be employed by a subcontractor, very similar in profile to the main contractor's QS. Again, you'd be looking at it from much more of a commercial angle, and it'd be all about defending your employer's position. So, link to education and curriculum. Maths, obviously, this is why we're all here today. You need to be comfortable working with numbers. You spend a lot of time looking at spreadsheets. I would stress here, though, that the maths we're talking about, it isn't advanced maths. You do not need A-level maths to be a QS. There's no calculus involved in what we do, anything like that. It is very straightforward, times and dividing, adding, subtracting. But the key thing I think to take away from this is you do need to enjoy the numbers. You need to be happy in a spreadsheet, happy at forecasting an end position, and just be comfortable with numbers. I think if you all like maths, that's probably most of you lot on this call. Just reinforcing the point made in the previous slide about the level of maths we're talking about. It is more about just enjoying, immersing yourself in the numbers. And to stress, it isn't all numbers. There's law, there's contracts, etc. But liking numbers and being comfortable in numbers is pretty key. So other subjects, law, as mentioned, it's a good one for understanding and being able to interpret contracts. Economics, business studies, being able to understand good business practice is obviously a benefit probably to any role really, but in particular quantity surveying. And as picked up before, we do need a degree. So we'd need either A-levels, A-level equivalents, or the HND, HNC route that then leads on to the degree. Okay, so now we're coming to the top 5 skills needed to be a good QS. Coming back to the numbers again. I think anyone who doesn't like numbers has probably come off the call by now. It's not all numbers, but a lot of the important parts are. So spreadsheets, the principles of forecasting and projecting figures to a point further in time. You need to be comfortable with that. You need to actively enjoy the challenge, I suppose. I think about the good QSs I've known over the years. They've all really enjoyed the challenge of predicting and forecasting a position and then delivering the job sort of on the nose. It's nothing that can't be taught or learnt, but just think about whether that's something you would like. Good knowledge of formulas in Excel as well is obviously key here. Okay, next one. Analytical. So you need to be able to read and extract relevant info in contracts and other documents and apply that info to the situation in hand, establish your position, and then be able to explain that to others in a coherent manner, not like that in other words, and bring them along with you, basically. I think that's a key part to it. We've probably all known people who are extremely intelligent, know numbers inside out, but it's no good if you can't explain it to other people in a way that they can understand. The key is to bring people along with you. And then this leads us to communication. So all that numbers and analysis are no good if you can't bring people along with you. So, and I think key here is being able to adapt your communication for dealing with different players in the industry. So, for example, you would communicate very differently with clients in a meeting in their office than you would be with your colleagues, or you would do with subcontractors in a final account meeting. And just to stress that effective communication doesn't just mean being the loudest person in the room. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Effective communication is, as we touched upon earlier, it's being able to explain yourself in a way that others can understand and take away and use themselves. So Teamwork. You need to be good working in a team. As touched on previously, there's a lot of very different characters in any construction project, and you have to find ways to get along with all of them. Again, as mentioned in the previous slide, clients, PQSs, engineers, architects, subcontractors, they're all going to be very different characters, and you need to be able to deal with them in very different ways. So you have to be able to adapt how you approach conversations depending on who you're talking to. You have to enjoy working with others. Big part of the industry is working as part of a team, whether that's on site, in the office. It isn't a job for someone who just wants to sit in the corner and beaver away on your own. And you have to enjoy variety. Every day will be different. We touched on this earlier. The different locations, offices, sites, you're dealing with different people on different days. Some weeks very busy, deadlines to hit, and then there's quieter, more reflective periods mixed in. You have to be adaptable, and you have to be ready for things to be different. Basically, the sites could be in different places. You could finish a site in Manchester, your next one's in Liverpool. You're not going to be going to the same office every day for the rest of your life. Adaptability is key. You have to enjoy variety. Okay. Now, I think some of you may have been sent this task to be done, which is a maths-based task. If I just go through the slides initially, and then I will have a crack at showing you the task. Might be easier. So basically, I've come up with a dummy pricing document, which shows costs for various elements of a dummy build. So some are priced per metre squared, some are priced per house. And then, and this will become clearer when I share the document, then there's a specification for 3 different house types. And the slightly different elements in each specification, i.e. it might be window type 2, kitchen type 3, electrical type 1. So the idea being, you populate the final tab of the spreadsheet for each house type. So you make reference to the specification for each, you refer to the pricing document, and then you come up with a total for each house type. Now if I just try and share this document, if you can find my mouse, there it is. Apologies. So hopefully we can all see that. I'm just looking at Bronwyn's nodding. Yes, thank you. So this is the pricing document. This lists the various elements of this dummy house, basically. So remediation is when you need to prepare the site, basically, so you can build on it. Foundation, basically the concrete that's in the ground. So different types of foundations here. That's the flooring system. That's what goes on top of the floor. This is the brickwork walls, timber frame, windows. These are more recognisable, hopefully now. Roof tiles, your flooring, your vinyl, your carpet. Plastic goes on the walls. Decoration is basically your paint. Kitchens, bathrooms, electrical. And then externals, so your paths and your patios, your driveways, your gardens. So that's your pricing document, basically. That tells you what the price of these different elements are. Hopefully that makes sense. And then this tab here is a specification. So we've got 3 different house types. They all have slightly different specification. So house type 1, for example, has remediation type 3, house type 2, remediation type 1. So going back to the pricing doc, we have different prices for remediation type 1 and remediation type 3. And that's the same throughout the document. So we've got the kitchen type 1 on house type 2, kitchen type 3 and house type 2, not reading my own words, and kitchen type 1 and house type 3. So go back to the pricing doc, scroll down to the kitchen there. So we've got different prices, kitchen type 1 and kitchen type 3. And then these 3 tabs here are what, as part of the task, we'd like to populate. So substructures for house type 1 refer to the specification. So we know it's remediation type 3, Bible piling, beam and block floor and screed. We input that there. And you go to your pricing document, which will give you the prices for these various elements. So just this element here in the document there. So unit is either going to be meter squared or per house, basically. And when it's meter squared in the specification, it tells you here what the Gifford is. So when you're filling in house type 1, your quant is always going to be 72. And the rate is that one. And you can go on to the rest of it, superstructures, so specification for house type 1, brick and block window type 2, roof tiles, internals, externals. So I suppose as you're filling in these 3, you're constantly referring back to the specification and the pricing document. And the idea being, at the end, you come up with an overall price for that house. It's no right or wrong answer, really. I mean, there is obviously, but it's more about just giving you a feel for the kind of things that we do in quantity surveying. Okay, so I get rid of that. Okay, well, thanks very much for listening. And is there any questions?
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. That was so interesting. I learned so much about quantity surveying that I never had any idea about before, so that was great. So I've popped in a chat if you've got any questions at all, either about quantity surveying, about what Mike has been talking about today, or about the task as well. If you want to pop those into the chat box at the moment, so we'll give you a couple of minutes to pop in any questions, but a couple have come through already, Mike. So one of them is, you were talking about the 3 different kind of quantity surveying roles, so being a client's QS, contractor or subcontractor. When do you make that decision as to which one you want to do? Do you have to do a specific degree at uni or specific pathway for each one, or is it kind of when you've done that and you've qualified as a QS, you say, actually I'm really interested in being a client QS, for instance?
Yeah, that's a good question. To answer part of it, no, there isn't a separate degree for each. It's the same degree course for all the roles. and there's nothing stopping you moving from one to another. I started out working for the PQS my first couple of years, and I moved to the contractors side. So I suppose you're certainly not restricting yourself by choosing one or the other, but I suppose the sort of things you'd think about is, are you interested in the construction side of things more? Would you like to be part of the construction team on site, based on a site office? If so, then that'll probably lead you more towards the main contractor route. If you're more interested in the I suppose the legal side of things, then that'll probably lead you more to a PQS route. But no, there isn't a separate degree course. You don't have to decide before you enrol anywhere. I suppose some of it comes down to, as well, what job offers you get. You probably interview at a variety of different companies, and you'd probably get a feel for it there, really. So no, there's no need to worry about making that choice, certainly at this stage.
Great, thank you. That's, yeah, again, incredibly useful, and I think great for everyone that's listening to hear that you don't have to make that decision before you kind of decide to be a QS, and that you can change once you are as well. And we've had another question, Mike. So someone's asking about, what's your favourite part of your role, and what part of the role do you find the most challenging as well?
Well, yeah, that's a good question as well. I think I touched on it in the presentation. I think you get a lot of satisfaction from delivering a good job on time and to budget. I think if you've forecasted all along that you're going to make X amount, and you've sort of managed that process, that's always a good feeling. But I think the thing that probably attracted me to industry initially, and what I still enjoy about it, is the people. It's quite a down-to-earth industry. No one really talks very much in business speak or anything like that. We'd be quite open and honest with each other, and I think I personally like that. You do meet a big variety of different people, and working as part of a team is very much critical. Certainly working for a main contractor, you're not just on your own. You have to be involved in the team. So that's probably what I enjoy most. In terms of the challenges, I think dealing with disputes are always challenging. Generally, you tend to lose sight that everyone's here to look after their own position, and it can be frustrating when subcontractors are constantly coming to you for more money, for example. Or the flip side of that, it can be frustrating when clients, QSs, aren't very willing to pay you money that you think you're entitled to. So that's always a challenge, but again, you get used to that. That's just part and parcel of the job, really.
Thank you, and again, it's really interesting to kind of hear as well, because especially before the session today, I didn't realise how much variety there was in the role of a QS too. So I definitely think that's quite interesting, that if you're watching today and thinking about, really have a think about what do you like doing? Do you like doing the same things, or do you like working in the same environment, doing the same tasks, or do you like that variety, and does that interest you more? And then that can really help in the future when you decide kind of what you want to do as well. We have had another question come through, Mike. So this one is kind of quite an interesting angle. It's about technology and how that has changed kind of the role of the QS since you've been working as a QS and you've been involved in the industry. And I know you touched on it a couple of times through your presentation, but could you go into a bit more detail about how technology's changed the role, what that looks like? Is that going to change in the future as well? Do you know? Yeah, so that's the question.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think to give you an idea how much it has changed, when I first started, I didn't have a computer at work. If I needed to, I had to go and borrow someone else's. So that's probably the main change, I suppose, in line with the rest of the world. Really, technology has exploded in the last 20 years or so. Emails wasn't really a thing when I started, and now you spend like an awful lot of your day replying and sending emails. I think knowledge of IT is useful, especially Excel. I think you do need to know your way around Excel spreadsheets. That's different from when I first started, when you were doing a lot more work on paper. Now, pretty much everything is on a spreadsheet. Some emails rather than letters. I think when I first started, faxes were the thing you use, and some of the older QSs used to moan that they don't have the time now to buy and sell some time with the idea of by return of post. So you get a letter in the mail that might have been sent the day before, and you probably got a day or two to answer that letter. And by the time it arrives there, 5 days might have gone by. They would be moaning the fact that now with fax machines, I don't know if any of you know what a fax machine is actually. How to describe a fax machine? You'd print out a piece of paper and you'd feed it. You'd dial a number and you'd feed it into this machine. And after it jammed 5 or 6 times, it would eventually appear at the fax machine of the person you're sending it to, and it would print itself out as a piece of paper. So yeah, the older timers would be moaning the fact that fax machines now mean you don't get more time to respond to queries. Now, of course, emails, you get no time at all, and we're all guilty of it. You send an email and you're like, right, why is that person not replied to my email instantaneously? So I suppose for all the benefits of technology, it does mean that things have to move quicker. I think in the last couple of years, the technology that we've used more and more is what we're on now, Teams. So we, as an industry, we're probably quite slow prior to lockdown to use sort of the idea of remote meetings. We'd be driving around the Northwest, attending physical meetings. Now, don't have to do that as much. So that's been a big change in the last couple of years. In terms of what's the next technology change, I couldn't tell you. I don't think any of us expected the changes that have happened. There's no doubt technology will become more and more of a thing as we go. And I think all you young people are extremely au fait with IT anyway, so I don't think any of you need to worry about the level of IT knowledge required. I think coming away from the IT side of things, technology in the industry as a whole needs to develop. We've done a few jobs last couple of years where the houses are actually built in a factory, believe it or not, and they get driven to site on the back of a big wagon in two pieces. So there's a crane on site, lift up the ground floor, then lift up the first floor and put it on top. So that's modular construction. So a lot more of those kind of things are probably going to be coming through in the future. But no matter how you build it, you'll always need a QS to manage the money and the law side of things. So yeah, I hope that was an answer of sorts.
That was definitely an answer. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. So I will just give everyone a second to add in any extra questions at all, but I'm not sure if there are any. So I think if we close the session there, then I want to say a massive thank you firstly to Mike. It's been great having you here today, and thank you so much for sharing all your insights about being a quantity surveying and the construction industry as well. It's been great to hear, and I hope for everyone that's listening that you've learned a lot and that yeah, you found out a lot about kind of the industry that you didn't know before as well, and that you're able to go away, have a look at that task and really get that feel for what it would be like working as a quantity surveyor too. And thank you everyone for all of your time today as well to watch. And the last thing I would like to say is that I've just popped a link into the chat. This is a feedback form. We really want to make all of our sessions throughout Meet Your Future even bigger and better, and really use your feedback to inform that as well. So if everyone who's watching, if you're able to go on and send us any feedback, that would be absolutely fantastic. So thanks everyone so much for your time, and we'll leave the session there. Have a great rest of your Monday and great rest of National Careers Week as well.
Thanks everyone. Bye.